My uncle handed me a bill at my wedding, $1,850. What I spent driving to all your childhood events. Itemized. Gas, tolls, emotional labor. I stared at it. My wife went pale. I smiled. You're absolutely right. Opened Venmo. Sent him $1,850 with the note for services rendered. Then I opened my laptop, pulled up a spreadsheet, and said, now here's what you owe me for the 11 years I paid your mortgage after Aunt Linda left. I hit send on the email. His face. My name is Daryl. I'm 34. I'm a dentist. And in my family, that has somehow always translated to one thing. Available. Available to help. Available to be understanding. I'm the one who finished school first. The one who didn't call home every time life got hard. The one who learned how to work 12-hour days with a smile fixed on my face because patients don't want to see your bad mood when they're already scared of a drill. I grew up in a family that liked to tell one story about me. Daryl's the stable one. It sounded like praise. It wasn't. It was permission. Permission to lean on me harder than everyone else. My mother used to say it with this proud little nod. My older cousin Mark would say it when he forgot his wallet. My Uncle Ron said it most of all. Daryl's got it. He said that for years. School fundraiser? Daryl's got it. Grandma's medication gap? Daryl's got it. The electric bill when my uncle was between jobs for the 5th time? Daryl's got it. And I did. Too often. Partly because I was stupid. Partly because when you grow up around people who make guilt sound like love, you stop hearing the difference. By the time I met my wife Nina, I had already built a clean, polished version of myself. Solid job. Small house. Good credit. Quiet routines. I flossed, filed taxes early, and sent money to relatives I knew would never say thank you without sounding annoyed about it. Nina noticed things quickly, not in a dramatic way. Just little things. Why did your uncle always call at the end of the month? Why did he always say, after everything I've done for you kids? Why did nobody in your family ever ask how you were before asking for something else? I didn't have good answers. I had the usual ones. That's just how he is. He helped a lot when we were young. He drove me to stuff when my mom was working. He means well. Nina would go quiet when I said things like that, not because she wanted to fight, because she knew I was repeating old lines I didn't even believe. Still, I invited all of them to the wedding. Of course I did, because some part of me still wanted one normal day. One day where nobody kept score. One day where my family showed up, smiled, ate dry chicken, danced badly, and let me be the center of my own life for 6 hours. For most of the night, it almost worked. The reception hall was warm and loud. The DJ had already played 2 songs that every ant on earth seems genetically programmed to love. Nina's friends were laughing near the bar. My best man, Theo, had loosened his tie and was pretending he hadn't cried during the ceremony. I was standing near our sweetheart table when I saw Uncle Ron weaving through the room with an envelope in one hand and the kind of expression people get right before they ruin something on purpose. He didn't even say congratulations. He stopped in front of me and held out the envelope. Before you two leave tonight, he said loud enough for nearby tables to turn, I figured we should settle up. I actually smiled at first. I thought maybe it was a card, maybe some weird uncle joke. Nina took one look at his face and her hand tightened around my wrist. Settle what up? I asked. He gave this short laugh. Don't act confused, Daryl. You think all those years I spent driving to your baseball games, your school events, your dentist camp, whatever, were free? I blinked. I'm sorry. What? Open it. There was something in his voice that made the room feel smaller. I opened the envelope. Inside was a printed invoice. Not handwritten. Printed. With line items. Gas, tolls, parking. Wear on vehicle. And one line, centered like he was especially proud of it. Emotional labor, $600. Total due, $1,850. For a second, I honestly thought it had to be a prank. Then I looked up and saw he was serious. Dead serious. His chin was lifted. His eyes were already daring me to object. Nina went pale beside me. My Aunt Denise, 2 tables away, had stopped chewing. Theo took one step closer, and my uncle said the thing that finally made it real. You're a dentist now, he said. You can afford to pay back the people who got you there. The hall didn't go silent all at once. It happened in pockets. A cousin stopped laughing. Someone near the dance floor lowered their phone. My mother from across the room stared at the invoice, then at me, and did not look shocked enough. That was the first bad sign. The second was the way Uncle Ron kept talking. Your father wasn't around. Your mother was working doubles. Who do you think got you where you needed to go? Who sat through those boring school concerts? Who showed up? I stared at the paper, at the neat little spreadsheet font, at the word labor, and something old and ugly shifted in my chest. Because this wasn't really about mileage. It wasn't even about money. It was about ownership. He wanted payment because, in his mind, helping a kid had made me his debtor for life. Nina looked at me carefully. I could feel her waiting, not pushing, just waiting to see which version of me would answer him. The old one, or the one I had become when nobody from my family was in the room? I folded the invoice once, very neatly. Then I looked up and said, "Wow." Uncle Ron nodded like he'd already won. And that was when I understood. This wasn't the beginning of the scene. It was the bill for my entire childhood, and if he wanted to make our wedding reception the place where accounts got settled, then fine. He was not going to light the full ledger. To explain why that invoice hit me the way it did, I need to explain my uncle, and my family, and the role I got assigned before I was old enough to notice it. My mom had me young. My dad left early and stayed gone in that very efficient way some men do, where they act helpless long enough that people stop expecting anything from them. My mother worked constantly. Double shifts, weekends, holidays. She came home smelling like coffee, bleach, and exhaustion. So yes, Uncle Ron helped. That part was true. He drove me to Little League a few times. He picked me up from school when my mom got stuck. He showed up at some events and acted like the loud, funny uncle everybody was supposed to be grateful for. But there was always a second part. There was always a price tag, even when nobody said it out loud. If he took me somewhere, I heard about the inconvenience later. If he bought me food, I heard how expensive kids were. If he showed up to something important, he made sure I knew what he had skipped to be there. "You owe people who show up," he used to tell me. He said it like wisdom. What he meant was, remember this later. My Aunt Linda balanced him out for a long time. She was practical, tired-looking, quiet. She'd roll her eyes when he got dramatic and say, "He's a kid, Ron. Stop narrating your own sainthood." I loved her for that. She was the only one who treated help like help. No speech attached, no guilt bow wrapped around it. Then she left. After 11 years of marriage, one afternoon, she was just done. No screaming. No broken plates. She packed boxes while he yelled, and she told him in the calmest voice I've ever heard, "I can't spend the rest of my life financing your ego." I was 23 then, in dental school, exhausted and already drowning in loans. A week later, Uncle Ron called me crying. Not fake crying either. Real tears. Broken voice. Talking too fast. "Linda's gone, Daryl. She emptied the joint account. I'm gonna lose the house." I remember standing in the tiny kitchen of my apartment with flashcards spread all over the table. I remember thinking, I cannot carry this. Then I heard my mother in my head. "He helped raise you." And I said, "How much do you need?" That question changed the next 11 years of my life. At first it was temporary. That's how these things always start. Just this month. Just until I'm back on my feet. Just till work picks up. Just till the refinance clears. The first transfer was $900. Then another. Then a bigger one when he said the mortgage company was being impossible. Then regular payments. Some months I sent part, some months I sent all. When I was in residency, I lived like I was still broke. Bad coffee, used furniture, shoes I wore too long. I said no to trips, no to dinners, no to almost anything fun, because every time I got a little ahead, Uncle Ron had another emergency. Roof leak, transmission, back taxes, a pipe, a deductible. A mix-up. He had names for everything except what it really was. Dependence. My mom called me noble. That should have been a warning. Whenever I hesitated, she'd sigh. "I just don't want your uncle homeless after all he did for you." That line came up so often it became background noise. And the sick part? I believed it, even when I noticed the little details. The fresh TV mounted in his living room, the sports betting app notification flashing on his phone, the new smoker grill on the patio, the small treat vacations that always somehow happen right after I covered a major bill. Once, when I was 27 and finally making good money, I drove over there because he'd called 3 times in one morning claiming the mortgage was due and he was short. I walked in and there was a leather recliner in the living room, brand new. Still smelled like the store. He saw me look at it and said, "Got it on sale." I stood there with a cashier's check in my pocket and said, "You said you couldn't make the house payment." He shrugged. "I need somewhere to sit too, don't I?" That should have been the end. It wasn't, because he knew exactly how to flip the script. His face changed. He leaned back in the recliner and went cold. "You know what, Daryl? Forget it. Maybe I should have let your mom figure it out alone all those years. Maybe I should have stopped picking you up from practice. Maybe I should have said no." And there it was. The hook. Always the same hook. Not "thank you," not "I'm sorry." Just a reminder that my childhood was apparently an invoice still collecting interest. So I paid. Again. I told myself I was preventing disaster. I told myself I was being decent. Really, I was just tired. Tired is dangerous. Tired people confuse survival with peace. Then I met Nina. At first, I didn't tell her much. It's hard to explain this kind of family system to someone who grew up with normal boundaries. Her parents were the type who brought soup when you were sick and then left before overstaying. They borrowed money from each other maybe twice in 30 years and treated it like a major event, not a monthly hobby. The first time she saw one of Ron's messages, she frowned. It was 11:48 p.m., need 640 ASAP. Mortgage short, don't make me ask your mother. She looked at the screen and then at me. "Why is he talking to you like that?" I said, "He's stressed." She said, "No, he's rude. Simple. Clean. Hard to argue with." After we got serious, she started noticing patterns I had stopped seeing. The calls came at the end of every month. The amounts were oddly specific. He never asked how I was first. And every time I sent money, he'd disappear until the next crisis. Once Nina said, "Have you ever added up how much you've given him?" I laughed. Actually laughed. Because I didn't want the answer. She didn't push that night, but a week later she opened a spreadsheet on our dining table and said, "I know you hate this. I'm not doing it to shame you. I'm doing it because numbers are harder to manipulate than feelings." So we went through my bank history, year by year, transfer by transfer, Zelle, Venmo, checks, cash withdrawals. I remembered handing him in envelopes. I had to stop twice, not because of the amount, because of the dates. There were months I sent him mortgage money the same week I skipped seeing friends because I needed to be responsible. There were months I sent him money after he mocked me for charging rich people to poke around in their mouths. There were months I covered his payment while he posted photos from casinos. By the time we finished, the total sat on the screen like something physical, a number so big it made my stomach drop. Nina stared at it, then at me. "Daryl," she said quietly, "this is not support. This is extraction." The number was over $100,000, not all at once. Not in dramatic movie stacks, in drips, in guilt-shaped transactions, in years of choosing his stability over my own ease. I felt stupid, then angry, then weirdly ashamed for feeling angry, which tells you everything you need to know about how I was trained. I confronted my mother first. That felt safer than Ron. I called her while sitting in my car after work. "I added up what I've given him," I said. She was silent for a beat too long. Then she said, "You shouldn't keep score with family." That sentence made my hands shake on the steering wheel. I said, "That's interesting, because apparently he does." She got defensive immediately. "He sacrificed for you." "He was an adult," I said. "I was 8. She sighed like I was being exhausting. "You always make things transactional when you get upset." I actually laughed at that, not because it was funny, because it was disgusting. Ron started escalating after I slowed down the payments. Then, after I stopped, he called more, texted more, used words like betrayed, ungrateful, cold. One text I'll never forget said, "You became a doctor and forgot who carried you before you could walk." I'm not a medical doctor, but in my family there's no real difference as long as the phrase sounds expensive enough to guilt me with. I didn't answer that one. Instead, Nina and I kept the spreadsheet, updated it, added dates, notes, screenshots where we had them, because something in me had finally shifted. Not all at once. I didn't become brave overnight. It was slower than that, like a jaw unclenching after years. When we got engaged, I considered not inviting him. I really did. Nina told me she'd support that. But then my mother started her campaign. He'll be crushed. It would humiliate him. He did so much for you. That phrase again, always floating above every conversation like a bad smell. So I caved. Invited him. Invited them all. And in the weeks before the wedding, I saw the old system trying to reset itself. Ron asked if I could cover his hotel because traveling for family isn't free. He asked if his son could bring a date even after we were at capacity. He complained about the parking fee at the venue we didn't control. Then, 3 days before the wedding, he sent me a message that just said, "Hope you remember who showed up for you before you got fancy." I showed it to Nina. She read it once and said, "He's winding up for something." She was right. I just didn't know he'd turn our reception into his stage, or that he'd walk in carrying a printed bill like he was finally ready to collect on being decent to a child. What he didn't know was that I had receipts too, years of them. And unlike him, I hadn't padded mine with emotional labor. Not yet. I looked at the invoice again, then at him, then around the room. People were pretending not to stare in the way people always do when they are absolutely staring. My uncle lifted his chin. "Well?" Nina's fingers touched the back of my arm. "Steady? Warm. Not a signal to calm down. More like, I'm here. Be whoever you're about to be." So I smiled. Not a huge smile. Just enough. And I said, "You're absolutely right." Uncle Ron blinked. "What?" "You're right," I said again, louder this time. "Services should be compensated." For 1 second he looked confused, then pleased. Actually pleased, like he thought I had folded in public and he was about to enjoy every second of it. I pulled out my phone, opened Venmo. The whole room seemed to lean in without moving. I typed in his username, entered $1,850, and added the note, "For services rendered." Then I hit send. His phone buzzed in his pocket almost instantly. He pulled it out and stared. Behind him, my mother said, "See? That's the right thing. That did it." Something in me went completely still. Not angry still, clear still. I reached under the sweetheart table where Nina had tucked our laptop bag earlier because she knew I might need to check vendor timelines or flight details. Instead, I pulled out my laptop. Theo made a sound like he already knew where this was going and wanted front row seats. I set the laptop on the table and opened the spreadsheet Nina and I had built. Every transfer, every date, every memo, every mortgage short and need help, and just till Friday. Uncle Ron's smile started to slip. "What are you doing?" he asked. I turned the screen toward him. Then, because I was done doing private shame for public users, I raised my voice enough for the nearby tables to hear. "Since we're settling accounts," I said, "here's what you owe me for the 11 years I paid your mortgage after Aunt Linda left." You could feel the change in the room. Not loud. Sharper than that, like the second before glass breaks. My uncle barked out a laugh. "Don't be ridiculous." I clicked the total tab. There it was, a number that had once made me feel sick. Now it made me feel awake. "I paid your mortgage fully or partially for 11 years, I said. "I covered utility gaps, property tax shortages, insurance lapses, emergency repairs you somehow had money for only after I transferred funds." My mother cut in fast. "Daryl, not here." I turned to her. "No, Mom. He picked here." That shut her up for half a second. Then Ron tried another angle. "That was family help." I nodded. "Interesting. So when you helped me as a child, that was billable. But when I kept you in your house as an adult, that was love?" His face went red so fast it was almost impressive. People at the next table were fully turned now. My cousin Jenna had her hand over her mouth. Theo had crossed his arms and was enjoying this way too much. Nina stood beside me, silent, eyes on Ron like she was done pretending civility had to mean surrender. Ron jabbed a finger at the screen. "You didn't have to do any of that," I said. "Neither did you." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "That's different." "How?" Silence. I started reading. Not everything, just enough. March 4th, mortgage short, please don't tell your mother I forgot again. September 19th, $860. Need this or they tack on penalties. December 2nd, $2,300. Can't lose the house before Christmas. My uncle stepped closer, voice low and furious now. Stop. I looked him right in the face. No. You wanted a ledger. My mother tried again. You're humiliating him. That one almost made me laugh. Instead, I said, he handed me a childhood invoice at my wedding reception. Theo muttered, yeah, I think the humiliation part started earlier. A few people actually laughed at that. Nervous, but real. Ron swung toward me again. You think you're better than us because you make money? No, I said. I think I'm done being treated like an ATM with childhood memories. Then I did the thing I'd been waiting 11 years to do. I attached the spreadsheet to an email already drafted in my outbox. Subject line, Payment Summary. Mortgage Assistance 2013 to 22-4. Below it, one sentence. Since we are now formally invoicing family support, please review the attached total of what you received from me. I turned the laptop so he could see the screen. Then I hit send. His phone buzzed. Then my mother's. Because I'd copied her too, and my Aunt Denise, and myself. His whole face changed. All that swagger, all that public righteousness, all that after everything I did for you energy, just collapsed. He looked older, smaller, meaner. Delete that, he snapped. No. You can't send people private financial information. I stared at him. You handed me an itemized bill for my childhood in public. He stepped forward like he might grab the laptop. Theo moved in so fast it was almost funny. Don't, Theo said. Not loud. Didn't need to be. My uncle stopped. My mother looked at Nina then, like this was somehow her fault. Nina finally spoke. Calm, flat, deadly. We spent years saying nothing. That part is over. And that was it. That was the moment. Not the Venmo, not the spreadsheet, not even the email. The moment was seeing there was no magic consequence for telling the truth. The ceiling didn't fall in. I didn't die of guilt. My family didn't suddenly become right because they were louder. They just stood there, exposed. Exactly as manipulative as they had always been. Exactly as dependent on silence as I had finally stopped being. The rest of the reception did not turn into a movie scene where everyone clapped. Real life is messier than that. My uncle called me cruel. My mother cried, not the wounded kind. The kind meant to drag a room back towards sympathy. She kept saying, this was supposed to be a happy night, which was rich, considering who had walked in with an invoice. My Aunt Denise pulled Ron aside and hissed at him hard enough that even from 10 feet away I could tell she was not defending him. A couple of cousins suddenly became fascinated with the dessert table. My younger cousin Matt, who had borrowed money from Ron before and never talked about it, came up to me later and said quietly, he does this to everybody, just not usually in public. That mattered more than I expected. Not because I needed witnesses, because I needed proof I wasn't insane. For years, my family had relied on two things. One, that I would keep helping. Two, that I would keep doubting my own version of events. When those two things broke, the whole system got shaky. Ron left before the last dance. He didn't say goodbye, he just shoved the invoice back into the inside pocket of his jacket like somehow taking the paper back would undo the fact that everyone had seen it. My mother stayed longer, which somehow made it worse. She kept trying to corner me in small moments. Near the coffee station, by the bathroom hallway, at the edge of the dance floor while Nina's college friends were doing an extremely committed but terrible group routine to a song from 2009. Every version of the conversation was the same. You embarrassed him. You took it too far. You know how proud men are. That last one almost made me choke on my own laugh. Proud men. That was what we were calling financially dependent relatives who invoice children for rides now. At one point I said, why are you more upset that I answered him than that he did it? She gave me the most honest answer she had probably ever given me without meaning to. Because now everything is broken. And there it was. Not because he crossed a line. Because I stopped absorbing it quietly. I looked at her and said, it was broken a long time ago. I just stopped pretending. After that, she left too. No hug, no congratulations, no apology. Just that stiff little purse-clutching exit she does when she wants everyone to know she has been wronged by the atmosphere. And then something unexpected happened. The room got lighter, not instantly, but steadily. Like a window had cracked open. People relaxed again. Music came back up. Theo handed me a whiskey and said, "Most stressful best man experience of my life. Great payoff, though." Nina laughed for the first time in 20 minutes. A real laugh. We danced. We cut back into our own wedding, and I remember standing there with my forehead against hers, lights warm above us, shoes hurting, tie crooked, and thinking, this is what peace feels like when you stop bargaining with people who feed on your guilt. The next morning, my phone was a war zone. Text from my mother. Text from unknown numbers that were obviously relatives drafted into the campaign. One message from Ron that said, "You are dead to me after this stunt." I stared at that for a full 10 seconds and then laughed so hard Nina came into the kitchen to check on me. "Are you okay?" I handed her the phone. She read it and said, "That sounds expensive for him." Exactly. By noon, 2 more messages came in. One from Aunt Denise. For what it's worth, Linda warned all of us years ago that he'd turn every favor into a debt. I'm sorry nobody stopped it. And one from my cousin Matt. If you ever want statements showing he borrowed from me too, I have them. That one sat with me, because it meant the pattern was bigger than me. I was just the one who finally interrupted it in public. Over the next week, the family split into the usual camps. The peace at any cost people said both sides had handled it badly. The honest people said Ron had lost his mind. A few called me petty. Nobody who had seen the invoice said I started it. That was enough. Ron did not sue me, despite one dramatic voicemail about defamation that sounded like he had gotten all his legal knowledge from cable television. He did demand I return the wedding payment, since it was made under hostile circumstances. I did not respond. My mother tried one final angle. She asked to come by the house. Against my better judgment, I let her. She stood in our kitchen, looking around at the flowers still dying slowly from the wedding, the unopened gifts, the stack of thank you cards Nina had already organized by family and friends, because she is that kind of person. My mother looked tired. Older. "Not softer," she said. "You didn't have to make him look small," I said. "He managed that himself." She flinched. Then she tried again. "He loved you." That one was harder, because I think in his own warped way, maybe he did. But love without boundaries is how some families hide control. So I said, "Maybe." But he also kept a receipt for being kind to a kid. She had no answer to that. She looked at the thank you card pile and said, "Are you writing one to him?" Nina, from the doorway, said, "No." I loved her so much in that moment it almost hurt. After my mother left, I blocked Ron. A full block. Phone, email, everything. I didn't announce it. I just did it. Then, because my body had been braced for years and didn't know what to do with the sudden silence, I did something painfully normal. I went to work. Cleanings, crowns, 2 fillings, 1 nervous kid in superhero socks, regular life. And it felt amazing. Not dramatic, not cinematic. Just steady. Predictable. Mine. Weeks passed. Then months. No midnight mortgage texts. No end-of-month guilt trips. No family emergencies that somehow showed up around holidays, betting season, or big sales. And in that silence, I found something I hadn't realized I was missing. Room. Room in my head. Room in my marriage. Room in my life. Nina and I redid the guest room, booked a trip we used to call irresponsible, started making plans without leaving space for someone else's chaos. At Thanksgiving, we went to her parents' house instead. Her dad overcooked the turkey. Her mom apologized to it like it had feelings. Nobody asked me for money. Nobody reminded me what I owed for existing as a child. And I remember sitting there with a plate too full of food thinking, so this is what family feels like when it doesn't come with interest. The funniest part was Uncle Ron didn't collapse the second I stopped paying. He rented out a room, sold a few things, picked up contract work, cut back. In other words, he did exactly what he could have done years earlier if I hadn't made it easier for him not to. That made me angry for a while. Then it set me free, because it proved what Nina had been telling me all along. I was never saving him. I was funding his refusal to change. I still think about that invoice sometimes. Not because of the amount, because of the phrase emotional labor. That was the real bill my family handed me for years, not just money. The work of managing their feelings, excusing their behavior, and staying quiet while I was being used. What changed at my wedding wasn't courage, it was exhaustion. I finally got tired enough to tell the truth out loud, and that truth was simple. Helping family isn't wrong. Using help as lifelong leverage is. Support given freely is love. Support used later as a weapon is debt. And boundaries are not cruelty. They are the price of self-respect.